So hello and welcome everyone to a specialist session. So this is from MADM Academy for anyone who has not been to any of our sessions before. My name is Scott and my background is that I am an illustrator and also a 3D modeler as well. We are going to actually be taking a look at the do's and don'ts of making a portfolio. So what we will take a look at now is a selection of some of the stuff that I've done previously, the good and the bad. Now, people might notice some of the logos here and they might seem very familiar. That's a little bit of a clue what this particular portfolio was relating to. So one of the most important questions that is consistently asked is, what does a good portfolio need? That will obviously vary in terms of content, depending on what kind of job you're going for, what kind of sector it's in. But ultimately, there'll usually be some consistent things when it comes to making sure that portfolio is professional. Now, the first thing that I always suggest for people to do is, if you find a position that interests you, you feel that you've got a skill set for it, you've made sure that you've got a sitting CV, a solid cover letter, you obviously need to make sure that your portfolio is right as well. And I would always say to use a job description as a design brief. Use that as your task list, as your tick list. Make sure that whatever it is that you are doing to present yourself, that is present in your portfolio. So this particular job that I was looking at, and once again, if anyone has figured out the logos at the beginning, was of course a Lego logo and a TT logo. TT is Traveller's Tales, or TT Games. They are a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, and they have been making the Lego games for 20 plus years. They've been at it for a very long time. They are quite a well-established company. They're also very much based in the UK. And a while ago, this was probably around 10 years ago, there was a job position open for a model designer, because the way Traveller's Tales works is to make sure that the three-dimensional models in the games are correct. They actually have someone make sure that it would actually be a practical buildable model. They want to get that sort of sense of realism, so that when a Lego vehicle or a Lego building or Lego prop is destroyed, it will break down into its pieces logically. So having someone be able to design that is obviously really important. I've been a huge fan of Lego ever since I was a child, so this was almost like a dream job opportunity. So from there, I went on to the planning stage. So like any other projects, planning it is absolutely key, especially if you are applying for a job. Obviously, that listing will not last forever, so you need to work quickly. Step number one is to check and see if there is a submission deadline. If you can't find one, try and estimate how quickly it will take for you to get your portfolio up to scratch. Like any project, think of each step, factor in the time you need for developing your ideas, producing the pieces, and actually getting it into your professional portfolio. So, step one of any project will be obviously the research and idea generation side of things. So by researching the job listing, I was able to pinpoint specifically what they wanted to see in a portfolio for applying to Lego games. So here's an example of a very quick mind map that I put together. So I knew that they wanted to see miniature builds, they wanted to see vehicles, they wanted to see buildings, and they might be interested in seeing robots as well. So with all of this in mind, what I was able to do is start figuring out, well, what models and assets do I already have that could be part of this portfolio? So by taking a couple of minutes, and that's really how long it took to put together this rough mind map, I was able to start figuring out what things I needed to prioritize. So that led me to the developmental side of things. What particular models did I want to maybe brush up on? Which ones did I want to actually screenshot? So at the time when I was putting this together, I was using an official program that Lego released a number of years ago called Lego Digital Designer. It was a fantastic 3D modeling software that anyone could use. And by using this, I was able to essentially create models that I wouldn't be able to create in real life due to limitations like availability of bricks and parts. So this was a fantastic way to build a portfolio. This was something that I was already doing in my own time anyway before this job listing even appeared. The job listing was actually on Lego Games' website themselves, so Traveler's Tales, the developers of it, it was in their careers section. So it can't be understated how helpful it can be to have an awareness of the kinds of organizations that you would like to work for. If you do have a dream job in mind, are you able to go to that company's website? Are you able to look on their jobs page? Do they actually have something that lines up with your interests and your skills as well? So that really is how I found out about that job. And the fact that I'd already had a lot of models that I'd produced, it felt like the perfect opportunity. So as I was developing my models, I was, of course, trying to get feedback. Feedback, of course, is a really important aspect of any creative project. You need to be able to get an idea of how well things are going or if anything needs changing. So I was using something as simple as social media to essentially ask, can people tell what this is? Does this look right? You know, little things like that. It would help me essentially improve what it was that I would be putting into the portfolio. Now, obviously, this was a 3D program. So in order to have a 2D static portfolio, I obviously had to generate imagery of those models. At the time, I thought it was a very good idea to take screenshots. What I then do is I bring those screenshots into Photoshop, tidy it up, crop them, adjust the lighting, and just try and make it look a little more visually interesting. Now, obviously, if you are applying for a 3D modeling job, anything you can do to showcase the 3D model aspects of it is obviously going to be quite helpful. This, however, once again, it's about 10 years ago, so while there were platforms where you could do that, it wasn't widely available as it is now. So, for instance, platforms like ArtStation will allow you to share 3D assets. There wasn't really a great deal of options for that back then. Now, once everything was formatted, obviously it was a case of putting it into this image-based portfolio. At the time, I got together my CV, got my cover letter written, and decided for my portfolio, I would use a Lego fan site called Mock Pages. Now, my philosophy at the time was, okay, if I use a website that is frequently used by the Lego fan community, that shows that I am part of that community and I clearly have an understanding of what they want. And in my mind at the time, I thought that would make me more hireable. So with all this in mind, I sent everything off by email. That was the submission process that they were going for at the time. So I sent across the link to portfolio, sent across the cover letter and CV, and I waited and I waited. I still carried on being creative in my own time, but unfortunately, I didn't actually hear back. The creative industry is, of course, very, very competitive, but the main thing is to not get discouraged because there often are a huge number of submissions, and it's unfortunately common that you might not hear things back. And if you do hear back, you might be lucky enough to receive a test brief. That's so they can get an idea of how you work and how you would potentially interact with the team as well. So, what actually went wrong? Let's take a quick look. So, these are some examples of the imagery that I thought was appropriate to share. So, this is an example of some different robot designs. I tried to make sure the portfolio had variety. So again, it had a range of different vehicles. You can see the Mystery Machine from Scooby-Doo. which even has some custom decals designed for it. We even have a interesting looking car that sort of turns into a jet. Again, something that a kid might be interested in a LEGO game. And then this really big, over the top, almost jumbo jet. On the subject of jets, we have this rather iconic vehicle from Marvel's X-Men series. This is the X-Jet. On top of that, I knew that they wanted to see miniaturized builds, so I made a little pool table, made some little jukeboxes, once again, thinking that this would be quite appropriate. Again, we've got this interesting sort of dive bar, maybe not necessarily as typically appropriate as you'd think, but I imagine that Lego Batman could be seen fighting some Lego goons in this kind of environment. On the subject of Lego Batman, we have Gotham City Police Department. Again, you can see a huge amount of imagery. You might even say an overwhelming amount of imagery. So, on the subject of what needs work, this is a bit of a Q&A portion now, so if people do want to unmute or if people want to use a chat, please do feel free to. What was wrong with that portfolio? What wasn't right about that portfolio? Because in my opinion, there were quite a few things. The quality of the imagery was, honestly speaking, not great. If we very quickly backtrack for a moment, you can see that there's a huge amount of dense imagery with very little direction of what it is. And just taking a look at the Q&A in the chat, no story behind the creation. That is a fantastic point. Yes, there is no context to these models. There is no labeling. There is no annotation. It is all very kind of bare bones. The actual quality of the imagery itself is not great. These are all very low resolution screenshots. Now, as some people might be familiar with, when you take a screenshot of something, you are basically limited to 72 dpi. That is the standard resolution of most screens. So this was already limited in terms of its quality. On top of that, it was a very basic 3D modeling program. It wasn't producing high-level renders. So as a result, the colors feel very muted. Everything feels very blurry. If you take a look at this one in particular, when you look at the tiles, you can see the pixelation. It doesn't look professional. When you look at imagery like this, you have the stock background of the Lego program underneath it and around it. It looks very amateur. It does not look professional by any means. We can see here that there's at least a little bit of context and labeling, but once again, it all feels very sort of bland. In some of these images, you can even see the navigation tools of this Lego program. It is extremely amateur. And while there are some stickers, some decals, once again, it's all very low resolution. It is not professional enough. So when we get to the question of what needs work, a lot of it needs refinement. It needs to look sharper. It needs to look cleaner. As has been pointed out in the chat, there's no story behind the creation. There needs to be context. There needs to be some simple labeling. There needs to be something that helps people to understand what it is that they are looking at. So if at first you don't succeed, keep trying. Once again, it can be very discouraging to not hear back, but don't give up. In the creative industry, there are always new projects, new jobs, and new positions. So look for those opportunities in the sector. And if you are lucky, in some cases, you might find that those opportunities actually come up again. What I did is, after obviously not getting a job with a portfolio as unprofessional as that, I took the time to try and improve my methods and try to improve how it was actually being displayed, how it was actually being shared. Essentially, making sure I was using a far more professional portfolio with higher quality pieces. So I actually took the time to learn how to use rendering software. I used a rendering software called POV Ray Tracer, and I used a third-party plugin called LDD Converter, which would allow me to take these Lego models and make far more realistic renders with them. So I evaluated my work and I realized that the problem wasn't necessarily the models and the design themselves, it was how they were being presented. You can see the comparisons here. The one on the left was what was originally in the old portfolio. The second image across, it's the exact same model. The only difference is how it's presented. It's far more professional. It's a much cleaner, sharper image. It's far more refined. You can even see, if you look very closely, the Lego branding stamped onto each stud of the parts. We have annotation. So once again, there is context behind it. There is story behind it. As simplistic as a story or narrative is, it is narrative context all the same. And again, simple arrows that show how different aspects of it move. It's a far better representation of the model than the previous portfolio. It is so important to improve your presentation. Once again, we can see with this example, the model has been updated, modified just a little bit. It has been made more colorful. It's been made more visually interesting. It also, once again, has the additional context with it. We can see at the bottom of the image, the bright purple and green splodge at the bottom. That is a small decal design that was created that could be applied to the building, so it would look like graffiti on the streets of Gotham. Just these little additional touches helped make it seem a lot more vibrant. And again, the higher resolution, the sharpness of the image. Also, once again, we compare this with the previous portfolio that had 20 images. That was a huge, huge amount of imagery. Yet we look at this, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 images. That's a significant amount less, and it's far easier to read visually. And again, helpful annotations for each of the images to help provide that context. Once again, it's really important to use the right kind of portfolio platform as well. I spoke to friends of mine who were also designers as well. They had a number of suggestions. Because it was 3D model related, I decided to go with Coraflot. Now, since then, I have been updating and moving to different platforms as well for slightly different things. So Coraflot, I'm probably still going to keep for my 3D modeling, but for my illustration work, I am starting to favor ArtStation instead. Once again, having those kind of clear, more separated portfolios can be very, very helpful. So, the Traveler's Tales job, 1 year later, after improving my portfolio, the job listing came up again. This time, I was far more prepared. I once again made sure that the CV and cover letter was up to date. And part of their submission process this time was to send them a small sample of the portfolio as opposed to sending a link or anything else that could be quite bulky or cumbersome. Once again, when it comes to submissions, it will vary from company to company, job post to job post, but in this particular instance, they wanted a small sample sending across. So this, what I'm about to show now, is an example of what I sent across. So once again, far more refined, far sharper in terms of imagery. We have clear labels. We have a little bit of additional information, once again, helping to provide as much context as we can. We have another one here, once again, showing the model off in a variety of angles, poses, and different modes. It shows the playability and how that could even function in a game's context. We have a far more refined Daffy Duck here. Once again, a little bit of annotation. The dive bar, it's looking a lot sharper, a lot less pixelated. We have also some renders of the smaller, more specific models as well. Once again, trying to really draw attention to those because that was one of the things that they were requesting in that submission. Gotham City Police Department, once again, it was overhauled, it was updated, it was made much cleaner, much sharper. Also had this as well, very intricate, very technical. It's also showing what's underneath the surface of a design as well to help give an idea of the complexity. This one again. We also have this particular one, so a car from a Marvel series at the time. I believe this was just before they released the first Marvel Lego game. So this one would have been a little bit out of the blue, but still interesting nonetheless. I even provided a couple of renders of a local piece of architecture. It was quite interesting as well. So again, trying to show a little bit of variety, but not going too big and broad with my portfolio as I did last time. Again, I was trying to make sure that I was providing enough examples of what they were asking for without giving them too much. It became overwhelming. So moral of the story, keep working because it's very rare that anyone will be able to walk into their dream jobs immediately. It takes time and experience to build the skill set and knowledge that you need to work in a very specialized area of the creative industry. Essentially, any design brief is a chance to experiment with building a portfolio piece. And what was amazing is on this second submission, I was far more successful. I actually did hear back from them, and they did indeed send me a test brief to complete. So here are some examples of the test brief. So there were two different things that they were asking me for. They wanted a Joker-themed vehicle that would work in a Batman game. They also wanted me to build a tree as well, but using very basic parts, no specialized leaf shapes, no specialized branches. It all had to be standard stock bricks. So really interesting design challenges. I believe it was 2 weeks to complete both of them. Unfortunately, on that second week, I was supposed to be on holiday, so I had to complete all of this within the space of a week. So once again, you can see what I've been able to do. I've been able to design the model. I've been able to give it renders of multiple angles, even show off the functionality of it as well. So a small lever on the back that when pulled would lift the top of the cab up and the boxing glove would fly out the front. I even did a very simple animation as well, which you might have seen in the top corner. So the whole idea was to have various kind of play functions within it. Once again, trying to balance real world Lego sets with what would be expected gameplay wise in game. In my mind, I could almost imagine the Lego Batmobile driving through the streets of Gotham while the Joker chased him in this truck. I was trying to get into the mindset of what it would feel like to see this model, to interact with this model. Now, Unfortunately, they decided to go a different way with the hiring process, but it was still a fantastic experience. It was brilliant to sort of interact with Traveller's Tales, have that opportunity, and really build up my experience of what it is like to get far further in the process. So it really is worth getting your portfolio to scratch and pushing your work out there, taking that sort of that risk, because it can be very daunting, it can be very worrying. But if you find a job that you feel is perfect for you, then you have to take advantage of that opportunity. So key features of a portfolio, again, it will vary from person to person. It will vary sector to sector. The main thing is to build up an understanding and research what kind of portfolio is right for you. If you are someone who is multidisciplinary but works in different mediums, having separate portfolios could be a helpful thing to do. Having slightly different platforms might be helpful as well. When it comes to applying for a smaller organization, having a varied portfolio can be a very good thing, because chances are, with being a small organization, you will have to multitask, you will have to be able to work on lots of different things and in different ways. If, however, you are going for a position at a larger organization, something more specialized, say for instance, something like Lego games, that specifically want someone who is a model designer who can design practical models, that's far more specific. Once again, if we take a look here at some examples of what's in my current portfolio, well, say current portfolio, my slightly older Coraflop portfolio, there is a range of different things within this. So this is why it's important for me to try and start segmenting things and start separating things a little bit more. So there is a lot of illustrated work here. My background and my area of study was illustration. So if I'd applied to that job with purely illustrated pieces that were 2D, it obviously wouldn't make much sense and it wouldn't get me very far. So making sure that your portfolio looks right and is relevant to the job listing that you're going for is, of course, going to be a huge, huge help. So the portfolio top tips that I would probably leave with people is, obviously, keep your portfolio up to date. Any new pieces that you are doing, try and make sure that they are visible. And if you don't already have a visible portfolio, make sure that you have signed up to a platform that works well for you. Whether it's using Behance, which is from Adobe, whether it's using ArtStation, or potentially something like Coraflop. Coraflop can be quite good, however, it is tailored slightly more to a US audience. Dribbble is another one which is incredibly popular as well. So there are many options out there for getting your portfolio visible. On top of that, you can, of course, build your own tailored website if that is an option that you want to go for, especially if you are going for a web development career. If you don't have a personal website that shows off what you can do, then that's obviously going to raise quite a lot of questions. Another really important thing to be aware of is try and, where possible, cycle out anything in your portfolio that's more than 2 years old. If you are using a portfolio to try and attract employers' attentions and it hasn't been updated in a number of years, that could raise a lot of questions. Granted, in that time, you might have been working flat out on a project that was unfortunately under NDA, so non-disclosure agreement, so you can't actually share anything, or at least you won't be able to for a number of years until it becomes public and it's safe to actually share that material. That being said, it would probably be expected that you would more than likely still be doing things in your own time anyway to keep a portfolio up to date. As I said, you need to make sure the portfolio is relevant to a specific job. So if it is a job in 3D, having a 2D portfolio probably isn't going to be the best approach. If you are going for a character design job and all you have is environmental designs, that's probably not going to be helpful either. So again, make sure that whatever it is that you are doing is relevant to that job role. And of course, get feedback, share it with people that you trust, network with other creative professionals, and start to build up an idea of what is working and what isn't working. Also, if anyone is interested, if you would like to sign up to MADM Academy, we do offer portfolio support as well. That can be incredibly helpful. It's certainly something to keep in mind. So thank you for coming along today, everyone. For anyone who is interested in knowing a little bit more about MADM Academy, take a look at our links in the description. Hopefully, we'll see you all very soon.